Hi, this is Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson. I think you're really going to enjoy today's program. Jerry Howard is with me. He's an amazing guy. He played football at UCLA, Pepperdine Law School, local attorney for 20 years, invested in the youth, coaches, and he has some real insight on what's going on in the country right now that I think you won't want to miss. So stay tuned. The Good Life is next. Welcome to Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson. I have a special guest today. Jerry Howard is with me. Welcome, Jerry. Good to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Jerry is a longtime attorney. He's a community, an advocate for kids, cares about young people. UCLA graduate, played football there, Pepperdine Law School, and he's been in Santa Barbara most of his life. But I wanted to start with kind of your upbringing and your family, which is your child number 13 out of 14. How did that work? What was that like?
Well, you would have to ask my mom that question. I just said if she stopped having kids, then I wouldn't have been here. So
That's true.
But yes, my mom had 14 children, and I'm her 13th child, and of course I have a lot of older siblings. The composition is 11 boys, 3 girls.
Wow.
So I'm the 11th boy.
Wow. Are you in touch with all of them? I mean, are you some of them?
Yes. I mean, they've moved around. My mom moved to California with her youngest 4 kids. So I have a brother and sister who are twins that are a couple years older than me, and then a younger sister. So 4 of us ended up having grown up in California, but most of my older siblings at least had their start out in Jackson, Mississippi.
Wow. What is something that your mom instilled in you, or maybe in all the kids? But what do you remember about growing up that your mom instilled in you?
You know, she was a single mother, and she was a very hard worker, and she didn't have an education, but she was a strong proponent of education. So if I would narrow it down to this: hard work, faith, and belief in yourself. I mean, she was a woman of profound faith. I was raised based on faith, and I'm probably here definitely because of that faith.
Wow. And did you decide early on, I'm going to college, I'm going to law school? I mean, what was that journey like?
It evolved eventually. It's ironic that some of my experiences growing up in Mississippi have a lot to do with what's going on currently with current events, but we were obviously on the poor side of town there. I saw my older brothers and some of their encounters with police officers, and then I saw my mom just kind of having this struggle of trying to deal with that system and protecting her sons and trying to keep or bail them out of jail, and doing it all with very little means. And it was really difficult and hard on her. I remember experiencing and seeing some events with police officers in our neighborhood, and even as a small kid, you can internally go, something's not right about that. But when those experiences would happen, my mom would always talk to us about them, and it was one of her things that she hoped that we really got an education and try to make an impact and do something out there. So that became the seed that was planted. And then I decided, I wanted to take a different route than most of my older siblings because no one had tried that route before. So I went into the uncharted waters of trying to figure out how to do the education as best as possible and advance myself.
And were you the first to graduate college?
First to graduate college, first to become a professional. Yes.
Wow. And then you have kids. You have kids of your own?
I have 2 daughters.
2 daughters. Wow. And is your mom still alive?
No,
She passed.
lost her 5 years ago.
Oh, really?
Actually, on June 15th, it'll be 6 years.
Okay.
So getting close.
She must have been really proud of you.
She would say that, yes, and she made it known. But I was more proud of her. And as you're seeing now, whenever I get the opportunity to speak, I turn it to my mom because of who she was, what she endured. I mean, my mom was born in the South on a plantation, worked on a plantation. She picked cotton. I'm not talking about my grandmother, who also, this is my mom.
Your mom.
And was a part of the civil rights movements in the South in the 60s and the 50s in Mississippi. And this black woman, as I said, with little me, and I don't know if you ever seen that movie, The Help.
No.
Did you ever see the movie The Help? The Help was it was a movie that came out some years ago, but it was about African American women working in the South, specifically in Mississippi, and they were domestic maids or house servants or housekeepers for wealthy white families. And that story, if you ever see it, epitomizes my mom, because that's exactly what she did.
Wow. And as you look at what's happening in the country right now, so you knew from when you were really little, watching what was going on, from your older brother's encounters with the police. You've had your own life. How do you, through your eyes, I'm interested to hear your perspective on what we're seeing right now.
What we're seeing right now is unheard voices, years of this type of systemic, and I'm just speaking particularly with the relationship with law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is a complicated, multi-layered issues that we have going on, and there's many different tangents you can go down. But there has been countless engagements between law enforcement officers and black men that either ended up with serious injury or death. I was in school at UCLA when the Rodney King beating occurred,
Mm-hmm.
and then thereafter the riots that resulted. And all these years later, where other events happened in between, we encountered this. So it makes you question how much progress has occurred, how much change has happened. And it's sad, really, to see that over the course of my life, we end up back here again.
Mm-hmm. I watched something on CNN the other night. This video was put together, I think, by a company, by a corporation like Procter and Gamble, or somebody put together a video, and it was called The Look. Did you see this?
I did not.
It was following an African American man, and it was showing kind of throughout his day different kind of looks he would get, from getting on the elevator to kind of, where he'd go here and he'd go there, and it was interesting. And then at the end of the day, it turns out he's the judge in the courtroom, and yet throughout his day, you get to see kind of they called it The Look. I've never experienced this before, obviously, but it got my attention. Like, so the relationship with police is certainly one thing, and
Right.
you've talked about that. And I think until I saw that the other night, I never thought, just in general, what's the difference? How can I understand better what it's like to be black in daily life, not just in encounters with law enforcement, but this video was kind of pointing out just in general the some of the differences that I'd never thought of. How would you characterize that, or based on your experience?
It is extremely difficult. It's exhausting because it's continuous, and you don't really get a break from it. If my skin was maybe a lighter complexion, or if I could pass as not being black one day, that would be a reprieve. There are looks that you get. There are stares. There are what they call those microaggression forms of bigotry, racism, whatever the term may be, that occur. I've received them.
Yeah.
I've received them when I'm in my normal non-work clothes, or I received them when I'm sitting here dressed as an attorney. A few years ago, I had a Mercedes S-Class, and I was pulled over, and the first question I was asked was, whose car is this? So it's really hard to articulate those occurrences, and what happens is they happen so often and occur so much that they build up over time.
Right. And that's what we're starting to see. I mean, wouldn't you say that anger's coming out?
Yeah, I mean, we're at the culmination of it.
Yeah. Because we have cameras now, and we could see this guy in front of our eyes for 8 minutes killed this guy. And I mean, I think it's been happening for a long time, but we saw it. And I feel like the kind of encounters you're talking about, which is just routine, not police necessarily,
right,
but just routine. And maybe I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the term I've been thinking about, my dad's one of his closest friends for years growing up was a Catholic priest, and I went down and saw him about 15, 20 years ago, drove 3 hours to spend some time with him. And I'll never forget, he passed away a couple of years ago. I'll never forget one of the things he said to me. He says, Dean, I think I've identified some of the most dangerous words in the universe. And I'm just waiting, like, what are these? And he said, I'm better than you. And that stuck with me. And I think if I was getting looks like all the time, like you're describing, or like that video I saw, or I was getting pulled over and getting asked whose car it was, I think I might feel like less than, or that somehow you think you're better than me, which would, I think, probably result in some anger.
As I said, it's frustrating, it's insulting, it's degrading, and my question, especially in the current times, why does it still exist, and where is it coming from? Because clearly it has to be occurring outside of the public's eye, in homes, in
hearts,
in country clubs, in these other institutions where there may not be any or many African American around or other minorities in the presence, where those push down feelings, or those I can't say this because it's not politically correct, words and expressions are coming, it's being passed on.
Right.
Because it still occurs.
Right.
So why is my generation in time am I getting looks, or other men or African American or minority women as well are getting looks when they're in certain places? Where's that still coming from?
Right. Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I mean, I think it's a heart problem, but I think clearly within the police departments there needs to be better ways of training, discernment. I mean, if this guy's had 17 complaints in 18 years, if it walks like a duck, I mean, at some point, it seems like there should be some consequences, so it doesn't have to get to what we saw the other day.
Right.
I mean, there seems to need reform in different systems, and fundamentally, though, this is a heart problem. I mean, that guy had a heart problem. He's got a heart problem, in my estimation.
I think you're correct about that. I think there may be others that are similar to him that have heart problems. And I want to be clear on this. Not all law enforcement officers are bad.
Right.
Not all of them have these heart problems that we're talking about. There are good ones out there. But what is confusing and questionable is if you have that good heart and you've witnessed or seen someone in your profession who doesn't, when you stay silent, you're complicit.
Right.
When it doesn't get addressed, it continues to go on, or that I'm better than you, or
Right.
superior attitude takes on,
Right.
and it leads to the situation that we're addressing now.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think I agree. I think the whole country's taking a good look at this now. A look in the mirror. I think a lot of people are listening. The question is, what's it going to result in? Are there going to be changes? But I heard, I'm seeing this on social media over and over again. We remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. And I think now's the time when a lot more people are saying, okay, we need to look at this.
But I also think, this is going to take some time. We're actually in uncharted waters. And what I mean by that is that we've had these situations and we've been faced with having to address them before, but it's never gone into that next deep continuous step. There would be some outcry. There would be politicians and corporations who give lip service to support, and after a couple of months, when things quell down, status quo became again.
Right.
This feels different.
It does.
I think there's a genuineness about really analyzing this and moving it forward farther than we've moved the pendulum before.
Right. I hope so. I would agree.
And I think what we're doing here, I know or I presume it's happening all over the country, and it needs to continue happening. Dialogue has to happen, but true open dialogue.
Yeah. Well, it's been eye-opening for me, and it's great to talk with you. I want to get closer in my life. We adopted a couple of young men into our home for 5 years. Mm-hmm. They were both 18 years old. One of them's from Yazoo City, Mississippi. One of them from L.A. They didn't have parents on the scene, so we took them in for 5 years. It was one of the greatest experiences of our life. Blessed our home, enriched our lives. Hopefully, did some good for them.
Right.
And I started to get a little taste, a little window into. Tito was the one from Yazoo City, Mississippi. I'm going to have him on the program here pretty soon. I started to try to get inside of his head on what it was like to grow up where he grew up. He grew up in a broken home situation. He knew who his dad was, but his dad wasn't in his life, and he grew up fighting. He was always fighting. I didn't grow up fighting. I didn't grow up knowing who my dad was, but having no relationship with him.
Right.
And I didn't grow up getting the look that we've talked about. And so I want to understand it better, from people who've experienced it. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why I'm excited to have you here, in addition to other reasons, is I think just there needs to be more understanding of what this is like. What this is like, just when you say it's exhausting, that's very incredible. That's important information for people to understand. That you get pulled over in a Mercedes, you're a lawyer, you're highly successful, and the guy's asking you whose car it is. That's significant. And I think the more people that can understand what this is like, I can just tell you for me to hear this today, it changes my perspective.
Yeah.
And it helps, I think it helps me, and hopefully the viewers here, understand what's going on right now. There's a lot of anger. I mean, do you agree with that?
There's a lot of anger. But going back to your point about how it being exhausting, I mean, you saw this video, and I don't know, I didn't see it, but it seemed to have tracked at least a couple of hours in this gentleman's day, and he ended up being a judge. So, if you just go through your daily routine where you wake up and you get dressed and then you head out, whether it's going to work or drop your kids off to school or running errands or any other projects or things that we normally picking up, dry cleaning or going to the store. I mean, all these different places where you can make stops or going shopping. So can you imagine each time you're going somewhere, going to pick up something to eat or going out to eat, just daily life activities. At a time when you're looked at, people, when you're walking by, they may grab their bags or pull their kids a little closer. And just think how doing that consistently, day after day, hour after hour, and maybe the only moment of respite that you have is that point in your home, but knowing that you got to go out again the next day and encounter it. So when I say it's exhausting, and then it can lead to frustration and anger, I mean, if you can imagine those episodes or those little microaggressions occurring on a constant basis, you know, what is it, like slowly dying with 1,000 cuts or something?
Right. What do you have a passion for youth? You've coached, you've worked, I think, at the YMCA, or you've worked,
Boys Club.
Boys Club, Boys and Girls Club. So you have a heart for youth.
That's right.
What do you say to youth today that coming into this crazy world we're living in, obviously, and it's interesting times, but in general, what is your message to youth?
You know, I always try to be positive, and I want them to be productive and productive citizens. I still believe in a strong proponent of education, and learning how to think, learning how to analyze, learning how to bring solutions. You know, as we see, there's a lot of talk and chatter going on right now, and it should. That's at least a start, but we need ideas. We need solutions. We need some answers to some of these issues that we're facing, and to get them to understand that in order for you to get those answers heard, or for you to get those changes made, you also got to get yourself into positions where you're part of making those decisions. You got to be in there and be an influencer. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of minorities that are sitting in these rooms, that are building the legislations, that are making rulings on the laws. A lot of these things that impact their lives, we don't have a seat at the table on. But we got to get ourselves more educated, more prepared to get that seat at the table. Now, I'm just talking about the youth. There will be many people my age or older, or maybe slightly under me, who will say, hey, I've been trying to get that seat at the table, but the doors keep getting closed.
And they have the education.
And they have the education. Yes.
And that's another issue.
But specifically going back to the youth, if what you don't see right now, and I would say to them, this doesn't have to be your future. But it's incumbent upon you to own it, to set some responsibility, and take action for it.
And put yourself in a position where you're at the table.
Get yourself at the table. But getting to the table, as I said, another discussion.
And that's another issue. But I think you're right. I have a friend, or not a friend, but I know of a guy. He calls himself a solutionary.
I like that.
I like that too. I think we need more solutionaries. You know, people, not just vision, but real ideas that we can implement to make little changes, so that we can see big change over time. How's fatherhood been for you?
Great.
It depends on the day.
And it depends on the day. Fatherhood is, it's a lot of work. Married's a lot of work. I'm sure motherhood is probably just as more, if not more work. But what you're doing is, obviously you're building your legacy, but you're also investing in something. And hopefully you get the fruits of that investment, that it yields a positive return. Having a father, especially a black male father, actively engaged in young children's lives, men and women, has a profound impact. I see it from my daughters myself. So, but fatherhood is work. It's work. You have a lot of responsibility, and you shoulder and carry a lot. But I think that's the responsibility of a father, in terms of taking care of and providing for their families. And you do the best you can, but it's challenging work, it's ongoing work, but it's rewarding.
And I think that's another message that is important. Um, I read 65% of young African American children right now are in a home without a father, which has doubled in 50 years. It seems like that's becoming a problem. Would you say?
Yes, but then we also got to, I mean, there's a myriad of reasons as to why. One is if they're encountering police, they're getting killed.
Right.
They're also highly incarcerated more than our Caucasian counterparts.
Right.
So if you're having black men being removed from their home or being part of their children's lives through those types of actions, that's a big cause of the absentee. There's probably other reasons that goes along with that as well. But there also have a lot of black men that are trying to have those relationships and make that connections with their families. As I said, and even me, who somewhat have it together in life, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah.
So if you're lacking some of my resources or some of the things that I'm blessed with, it's probably even more challenging.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's for sure. Well, you're a great example, I would say, and nobody's perfect, but it's amazing to hear your story, and first, in college and law school, and what you've done in the community. It's really a pleasure to meet you. So,
well, thank you. I think I'm still at the beginning of all my work. I got a lot more work to do.
You're good. Well,
for a community, family, for our country.
Good. Well, I look forward to working together if we can. But it's a pleasure to meet you. So thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you next time.